So 30 years now on the bench. Can you give me an idea, just what would you say would be one of the most important decisions that you were involved with?
I get that question on occasion, Mark, and my answer remains the same. The most important decision, I think, is the one that I'm working on right now. Cite the case that you're relying on, or the cases that you're relying on.
Ann Walsh Bradley began her tenure on the state's high court in 1995. Since then, she has been involved in some 28,000 cases.
But I will say that opinions dealing with individual rights, rule of law, precedent, access to justice, transparency in government are all opinions that would mark part of my 30 years here on the court.
She is currently the longest serving justice on the court and takes pride in the distinction of how she earned her seat on the court.
Now, while you were not the first woman on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, you were the first woman to be elected to the court.
That's correct.
Kind of a distinction. The ones before you were appointed and then won re-election
Yes.
to the court. Does that distinction hold a milestone for you?
It does for me personally, that's right. Getting to the court by way of election for me was important. I remember talking to many judges throughout the years, encouraging them, top-notch judges, encouraging them to run for the court, for a seat on the court. And so many of them would say to me, well, I would take an appointment, but I'm not going to run. That was common. And so it was, for me personally, kind of a badge of courage that I was willing to make that step.
When Bradley first became a lawyer, she was the first woman at the law firm that hired her in Wausau.
And I remember my supervisor said to me, trying to be gracious to me that morning when I showed up for work, he said, you know, I have no problem with a woman trying to do a man's job. So there were not a lot of women attorneys in that part of the state.
In 1986, when she became a circuit court judge in Marathon County, there weren't a lot of women in that role either. Fast forward to today, where the Wisconsin Supreme Court is now made up of 6 women and 1 man.
What do you make of that?
Well, in Wisconsin, cream rises to the top. That's what I make of it, Mark. They win based on their credentials, their messages to the voters. There may be a cry for diversity from some, although you know that word on occasion is spoken a little more quietly these days. But we have 6 women out of 7. That's remarkable in the United States, as you indicate.
In the race to fill her seat on the court, Bradley outwardly supported Dane County Circuit Court Judge Susan Crawford, who thanked her during her victory speech.
You leave an incredible legacy of service to our state, and you are the embodiment of fairness and integrity, and I'll try to make you proud.
Have you always been as involved in that election as in past elections?
No.
Why was it different this time?
It seemed to me, and this was a tough choice for me to make because I have not been as involved, but it was such an important election that I thought, and it was, of course, to take my seat, that my voice was important to be heard.
During her entire time on the court, she's been using her voice to champion civics education through the National iCivics program and the Wisconsin court system's Court with Class. That's where high school and college students interested in the judicial system visit the court to witness an oral argument and meet with the Supreme Court Justice. Bradley met with these students back in March.
And come again to the Capitol. It's a good place to learn about government, all 3 branches, right?
You know, with all the cuts we're seeing to education, is it important to continue the civics education? Are we seeing enough support for that type of education?
Listen, when you're talking about civics education, you're talking about the heart of democracy, right? And how important, now more than ever, I think, it's important that people understand the role of government, the role of the three branches of government. That's been true all throughout our history. But certainly it's a poignant time now for civics education, not just for students, but for all of us, right?